Hey, Brad Clark here for Rigging Dojo. This is going to be a couple mirroring tips and tricks, and this started out with me asking on Facebook how you can mirror skin weights from one surface to the next um, on geometry or curves like NURBS objects compared to just a solid attached polygon object. And the simple answer is Maya mirror weights. I know it's a little bit of a trick question, but there are a couple gotchas. So let's go ahead and look at the mirror skin weights tool. And if we look in our scene here, I've got a couple curves skinned. So if I grab this, I can move this around, and you can see that the weighting is the same. Now, if I go ahead and just go to skin and reset this to default weights, you can see that now the skinning no longer matches. And so I have this curve here, and these are all separate objects. In the past, a few versions ago, this is my 2016, so years back, if you were trying to mirror skin weights on objects that weren't a solid object, let's say you have a curve like this, Maya skin weight mirror tool would fail. You had to move the pivot point from the origin. So if you centered pivot on all these objects, and that if you ever have this fail, you can try that. Modify the center pivot, and that moves the pivot for the object off of the origin, so that now Maya can actually tell where to mirror it to, instead of just thinking it's the origin. Lucky for us, they actually fixed it, and not very many people, based on their feedback, realized this. So for example, if I grab this curve, and I grab this curve, now the gotcha is that on a single mesh, this direction setting actually matters if you're trying to mirror from one side to the other. When you're mirroring from object to object, the selection order matters. So if I select this first and then the target and hit apply, now you can see that my skinning is updated and it matches. If I picked it in the wrong order, wasn't paying attention or using a script or something, and apply, now it's going to go the other direction. So just be aware. Also notice I don't have to have them in the same position. The skin is being moved by the joint, so it doesn't matter if I'm in bind pose or not. The joints are not named the same. They're mirrored, but they have different names. Of course, you can use label, but you don't need to. So just pick the plane across the axis, and instead of direction, it's selection order. So that's pretty easy, and thankfully Maya tool works. Now, there are a couple other mirror things I want to talk about with deformers, because this is kind of going along with things people aren't aware of or didn't realize, and a few intricacies with the way they work. So let's go ahead and close, and let's take a look at the sphere object. So this is just a polygon object. It's at the origin. I've created a Softmod on it and painted weights. So now, actually, let me just delete that and I'll start over. So I'll go ahead and select this object. I'll go to Deform, Soft Modification, and where I click on it, it's going to place the soft mod, and now I can move it around. But if I want to mirror this, I could try to go into Deform, and there is under the Deform menu, Mirror Deformer Weights. This looks like the mirror skin weights, but it's not. It doesn't have the ability to pick by name or anything else. It does have the ability to create a new deformer, though, and then the direction. So this is, again, a little bit quirky, but let me go ahead and apply this and see what happens. So I'm going to hit mirror, and I grab the soft mod handle and move it around, and you can see that it doesn't match. It's not correct. So the mirror deformer weights really doesn't know what to do with the soft mod that's been placed kind of at the origin. But luckily, under bonus tools, there is a rigging utility that will let you mirror soft mods. So you can use this mirror soft mod node, select the handle you're trying to mirror, pick what space you want it to be in, and hit apply. And now you actually have the ability to mirror soft mods across the object. So handy if you're trying to set up a quick deformer system for a face, or you're trying to just add some symmetrical soft mods. So that's the tool, and that's under bonus tools. Now let's look at deformer weights real quick, because this is something that I thought was actually a bug for a little bit, but it's not. It's just kind of the way it works. So with just one cluster, so I've got a cluster on here, and this works for multiple deformers, but I want to just look at a cluster. So I've just picked this object, I created a cluster, and then I went and painted the weights. So if I go to Paint, Cluster, Cluster Weights, it brings up the Paint Attribute tool, and then here you can filter by what you're painting. So right now we only have one cluster on here, so I get Cluster Weights, and I can paint the influence. Okay, so now if I turn off Create New Deformer and I tell it to mirror weights, I can hit Apply, and it mirrored the weights from the positive to negative. So if I do this way, it mirrors the weights across. So now you can see that it leaves the weights on this side and it mirrors it over for that cluster object. So now if I pick the cluster handle, I've got the same weights on both sides. Let me undo that. But if I want to mirror my cluster and have two clusters, but with the opposite weights, so I have a cluster here for this side of the mesh, and I want a cluster that works on this side, I pick this object, I have my direction, and I say Create New Deformer. And I expect that that would mean I mirror across. So let me hit Apply and grab this other cluster. Now look what it's done. It actually mirrored the weights and created a cluster. So if you're trying to get a cluster that you've painted for half of the mesh onto this side, turn off the directionality. So we uncheck this and simply tell it to mirror and create a new deformer. So now I'm going to hit Apply, and when I grab the cluster, I have two clusters that are affecting the two halves of the object. So that's just a tip. If you've ever tried this before and never had it work, this is why. Because you don't want to mirror the weights and create a new cluster that is mirrored. You just want to mirror and create a new cluster and not have it also flip the weighting. So I think that's a little misleading, but just the way it works. Now, while we have two clusters on here now, this window doesn't look like it's got anything. So now if I pick this and I hit Apply, we get a warning that says use the option box to specify the deformer, but there's no option. You have to close the window, pick the object, and go back and reopen the mirror deformer weights options. Now it updates the UI and lets you pick which cluster you're trying to mirror. So if you've added another cluster, and I go ahead and pick this and I create a cluster, deform, or if I create a, let's see, whatever, nonlinear, whatever it is you want to do, twist. There is no updating this window. There's no way to refresh this. So you go back and select the object and go to Deform and Mirror Deformer Weights and reopen. And now you can see that the twist is on there, and then we can mirror it. And that way it's going to mirror the twist handle. Or not try to mirror the twist handle, but you see what I'm saying. It shows you what deformers are on there. So I can then mirror the other cluster, and so now I've got a third cluster that is got the weights mirrored. So this is a little bit of a clunky tool, but if you are in the need to mirror, let's say, a wire deformer, then and you have multiple deformers on an object, just make sure that you refresh the window each time you've changed something, and it will give you the option to pick which deformer you're trying to mirror. Also leave off the direction as you mirror it so that you end up with a deformer that is not affecting both sides. And hopefully that will help you out in your mirroring options for creating softmods or creating clusters or other wire deformers and other deformers you need to mirror across. Or simply you're just needing to mirror two rigging nodes or ribbons. The selection order matters. All right, hope that helps you out.